The scream of jet engines tearing apart overhead. That's the sound that changed my life. I slammed on the brakes as fire split the night sky and a white jet plummeted into the black Atlantic like a falling star. In the seconds it took for the wreckage to start sinking, I made a choice that would destroy everything I knew. I dove in. The scream of jet engines and the crack of something exploding overhead split the night before I even understood what was happening. I slammed on the brakes, my heart lurching into my throat as I watched a streak of fire tear across the black sky. A sleek private jet, white body glinting in moonlight, trailed smoke and flame as it careened low over the dark Atlantic just beyond the coastal highway. In a sickening, hypnotic instant, the aircraft struck the water with a hiss that sounded like the ocean screaming. The impact sent a shockwave through the pavement beneath my tires. For a heartbeat, I sat frozen behind the wheel of my pickup, watching in horror as the broken fuselage bobbed violently and began to sink beneath the churning waves. By the time I kicked my door open, adrenaline had burned away the paralysis. I stumbled down the gravel embankment toward the rocky beach, nearly twisting my ankle on the slick stones. My pulse roared in my ears. Oh God. Oh God. A plane was in the water, and someone could still be alive in there. Without a second thought, I yanked my phone from my jacket pocket with shaking hands and dialed 911, shouting breathless details at the dispatcher. Crash off Miami coast, just south of Haulover Beach, near the old lifeguard tower. The salt wind cut through my shirt as I tossed the phone onto the sand and kicked off my sneakers. There was no time to wait for the Coast Guard. Every second mattered. Stripping off my jacket, I plunged into the frigid water. The shock of the cold stole the air from my lungs, but I forced myself to keep moving, arms and legs churning through the black, ink-dark waves. Salt water splashed into my mouth, bitter, briny, choking. Out in the darkness, wreckage loomed, a jagged silhouette against the faint glow of moonlight on mist. "Hello," I shouted between ragged breaths, spitting out seawater. "Is anyone there? Can you hear me?" Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. My voice echoed uselessly over the slap of waves and the low hiss of something still burning. A slick of jet fuel coated the surface, rainbow shimmers spreading in the moonlight. The acrid scent of smoke and aviation fuel filled my nose. Coughing, I swam closer, careful to avoid the twisted metal and torn leather seats drifting past. One wing jutted above the water at a crooked angle like a dying animal's limb. The rest was vanishing fast into the depths. Think, Kimberly, think. Gulping a breath, I dove under, eyes open against the salt sting. In the eerie green dimness underwater, I made out the shattered cockpit windows and the shadowy form of a man still strapped into his seat. Bubbles leaked slowly from his parted lips. He was running out of time. My lungs burned as I fought my way inside through a jagged tear in the fuselage. I grabbed the man's shoulder. His body was limp, head lolled against the seat. "Not dead. Please do not die." I hooked an arm under his armpits and yanked. He was wedged by the crumpled console and still buckled in. The plane groaned around us, metal shrieking as water rushed in faster. Panic beat at the edges of my mind. Fumbling in the dark, I found the seatbelt release and pressed it hard. The harness gave way and the man's full weight slumped onto me. I nearly lost my grip as the floor tilted sharply. The jet was sinking faster now. Kicking hard, I dragged him through the cockpit opening. Broken glass scraped my forearm, and the roar of blood in my ears grew louder. "Move! Move!" Light exploded in my vision as we burst to the surface. I gasped and coughed, sucking in sweet oxygen. The man's head lolled against my shoulder, but I heard a wet, strangled sound from his throat. A cough. He was breathing. Barely. Relief and determination surged through me. Hooking an arm firmly around his chest, I started the brutal swim back to shore, towing him along as waves battered us. My muscles burned and my teeth chattered violently by the time my feet found the rocky shallows. With the last of my strength, I hauled him up onto the pebbled beach. We collapsed just beyond the tide's reach. I rolled him onto his back, ignoring the pain screaming from my shoulders. Moonlight fell across his face, a strong face, pale and unmoving, with dark brows and sharp cheekbones. He looked mid-30s. A gash on his temple oozed blood, and his skin was deathly gray. I pressed trembling fingers to the side of his neck. Pulse, faint, but there. His chest barely rose. Water burbled from his lips. Training kicked in through the haze of panic. Tilt the head. Clear the airway. I sealed my mouth over his and gave 2 rescue breaths. His chest rose shallowly beneath his soaked white shirt. Positioning my hands, I started compressions. "Come on," I pleaded aloud, voice cracking. "Stay with me. You've got this." After a dozen compressions, he convulsed and coughed up a stream of seawater. I turned his head to the side as he retched weakly, expelling the ocean from his lungs. A shaky laugh of relief escaped me. He was alive. In the distance, faint sirens wailed, likely the Coast Guard or fire department responding to my call. The man's eyes fluttered open at the sound. Just slits of steely gray beneath heavy lids. His hand suddenly shot out, grabbing my wrist with startling strength. I yelped, nearly falling back. "No hospital," he rasped. His voice was barely audible, a raw scrape of sound, but urgent. An accent, thick and Italian, twisted the simple words into a command. "No hospital?" He must be in shock, not thinking clearly. I leaned closer, trying to enunciate calmly through chattering teeth. "You were in a plane crash. You nearly drowned," I said slowly. "You need a hospital." His grip tightened painfully on my wrist. Even half-conscious, his eyes bored into mine with ferocity. "No, please." Each word was labored, desperate. "No police. No hospital." Understanding flickered. He was afraid of the authorities. Instinctively, I glanced over him, a torn, expensive white suit, waterlogged Italian leather shoes, and under his jacket, a shoulder holster strapped across his chest. The unmistakable shape of a handgun was still secured there. My stomach lurched. Who exactly had I just pulled out of that plane? The sirens grew closer. Red and blue lights started to strobe against the low clouds over the bay. The man struggled to sit up, grimacing, but he sank back with a stifled groan of pain. He was in no condition to flee, but clearly terrified of being found. I knew nothing about him. He could be a criminal for all I knew, but I'd sworn an oath to preserve life. I couldn't let him die, and right now, keeping him calm and alive was my priority. Mind racing, I made a split-second decision. I cupped his face, making sure he focused on me. "All right," I whispered. "No hospital. I promise." His brow relaxed a fraction. His hand slipped from my wrist, and he went limp again, eyes sliding closed in relief or exhaustion. My heart thundered. What on earth was I doing? Headlights swung into the beach access road. I had only seconds before first responders swarmed the area. If they found him, he might panic or do something reckless. Jaws set, I scrambled to my feet, cold water streaming off me, and scanned the beach. There, a narrow trail leading up the embankment toward the road where I'd parked my truck. If I could get him into my vehicle before they spotted us. I crouched and hooked my hands under the man's arms. "I'm getting you out of here," I murmured, not even sure he could hear. Using every ounce of strength left in my body, I began dragging him over the pebbles toward the shadows. I barely remember the drive home. My hands shook on the wheel the entire way, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror where he lay collapsed across my back seat, unconscious and bleeding onto the upholstery. Every set of headlights behind me felt like pursuit. Every siren in the distance made my stomach clench. But somehow, we made it. My bungalow sat dark and quiet at the end of a gravel lane, tucked between seagrass and weathered driftwood fencing. I'd always loved how isolated it felt, peaceful, private. Now that isolation felt dangerous. I dragged him inside, grunting with effort as I maneuvered his dead weight onto my couch. He was heavy, all muscle and soaked fabric. His white suit, expensive, tailored, was now stained crimson and reeking of salt, smoke, and jet fuel. I peeled off his jacket carefully, breath catching when I saw the shoulder holster underneath. The gun was still there, cold, real. I set it on the coffee table with trembling fingers, then stepped back as if it might go off on its own. What are you doing, Kimberly? I didn't have an answer. Moving on autopilot, I grabbed my first aid kit from the bathroom and returned to him. Under the dim light of my table lamp, I sterilized the gash on his temple, hands shaking as I worked. His shirt was torn open, revealing more injuries, bruised ribs, shallow cuts from the wreckage, but it was the other scars that made me pause. Old scars, bullet wounds, knife marks, a life written in violence across his skin. Who is this man? I bandaged what I could, my marine biology training doing double duty tonight. I'd stitched up injured sea turtles and dolphins before, but never a human. Never someone who looked like he'd survived wars I couldn't imagine. When I pressed a gauze pad to his ribs, his eyes snapped open. I jerked back, heart hammering. Those eyes, sharp, gray, calculating, locked onto mine with an intensity that pinned me in place. He didn't groan or thank me. Instead, he scanned the room with cold precision, cataloging the windows, the door, the exits, like a predator assessing a cage. "You're awake," I managed, my voice barely steady. His gaze returned to me, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice rough from smoke and seawater, "I'm Diego." Not "thank you." Not "where am I?" Just his name, a statement. "Kimberly," I replied quietly. He shifted, grimacing as pain lanced through him, but his eyes never left mine. "You shouldn't have brought me here." "You asked me not to take you to a hospital," I shot back, finding a spark of defiance beneath the fear. "Where exactly was I supposed to bring you?" His jaw tightened. "Nowhere. You should have left me. You would have died." "Maybe." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Now you might." The words hung in the air like smoke. I glanced at the gun on my coffee table, then back at him. "What happened up there? Why did your plane go down?" "Off course," he said, offering nothing. "Mechanical failure. Liar." His eyebrow arched slightly, surprised maybe, or amused. Hard to tell. "There was a bullet hole in the fuselage," I continued, pulse quickening. "You were handcuffed to your seat. That's not mechanical failure." Silence stretched between us. Outside, the waves crashed rhythmically against the rocks, a sound that usually soothed me. Tonight, it only amplified the tension inside these walls. Diego closed his eyes briefly, exhaustion etching deep lines into his face. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "The less you know, the safer you are." "I'm already not safe," I whispered. "Am I?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, silent and accusing. I could still call the police, should call them. This man was clearly dangerous, armed, injured in suspicious circumstances, terrified of authorities. But when I looked back at him, I didn't see a monster. I saw someone hunted, someone running. The kind of fear in his eyes wasn't guilt, it was survival. "You need rest," I said finally, wrapping my arms around myself. I was still barefoot, still damp from the ocean, and suddenly bone-tired. Diego's eyes slid closed. His breathing evened out, but just before sleep claimed him, he murmured, "If they find me, you're dead too." The words hit like ice water. I sank into the chair across from him, watching his chest rise and fall, the gun glinting on the table between us. Sleep didn't come for me. I sat in the darkness, listening to the ocean and the stranger's breathing, wondering what I'd dragged into my home. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the blinds, I heard it. Engines. Multiple engines. I moved to the window and parted the curtain with one finger. My blood turned to ice. 5 black SUVs were crawling up my gravel drive, fanning out in perfect formation. They surrounded my house like wolves circling prey, engines purring, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see who was inside. I turned back to Diego, still unconscious on my couch. What have I done? The car doors began to open. The doors slammed in unison, a coordinated sound that made my skin crawl. Men emerged from the vehicles like shadows given form. 6, 7, maybe 8 of them, all dressed in dark suits despite the early hour. They moved with military precision, fanning out across my small front yard with the efficiency of a tactical unit. No hesitation, no wasted movement. These weren't paramedics. They weren't police. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stood frozen behind the curtain, watching them take positions around my house. One man stationed himself near my truck. Another moved toward the side gate. The rest advanced on my front door. Then a voice cut through the dawn air, calm and authoritative. "Ms. Williamson, step outside, please." Please. My stomach dropped. They know my name. I glanced back at Diego, still unconscious on my couch, his chest rising and falling steadily. For a wild moment, I considered not answering, pretending no one was home. But the man outside spoke again, patient and unyielding. "We know you're in there. We're not here to hurt you." My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. They had my house surrounded. I opened the door. The man standing on my porch was tall, lean, with slicked back dark hair and a face carved from marble. His eyes were pale blue, cold and assessing. He wore an expensive suit that somehow remained immaculate despite the humid morning air. When he looked at me, I felt dissected. "Ms. Williamson," he said, his accent faintly European. "My name is Carlo Ventresca. May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. I stepped aside wordlessly, and Carlo entered, followed by 2 of his men. His gaze swept the small room in an instant, cataloging, analyzing, and then stopped cold on the couch. On Diego. Something shifted in Carlo's expression. The icy composure cracked for just a heartbeat, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. "Boss," he exhaled, moving toward the couch in 3 long strides. "Boss." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Carlo crouched beside Diego, checking his pulse, his breathing, the bandages I'd applied. "We thought you were gone," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Then he turned to me, those cold eyes sharpening. "You pulled him from the wreckage?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "You treated his wounds?" "Yes." "Anyone else know he's here?" "No," I whispered. I kept my promise. No hospital, no police." Carlo studied me for a long moment, and I felt the weight of his scrutiny like a physical thing. Then he straightened and gestured to his men. "Get him to the car, carefully." They moved immediately, lifting Diego with surprising gentleness. I watched, rooted to the spot, as they carried him toward the door. That's when I noticed the bulges beneath their jackets, guns, barely concealed. And the SUVs outside, gleaming black and windowless, bore no police insignia, no official markings at all. These men weren't rescuers. They were soldiers. And Diego wasn't just some businessman who'd survived a crash. Carlo's gaze returned to me. "You helped him." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." He nodded slowly, something unreadable passing across his face. "Then you belong to us now." The words hit me like a fist to the chest. "What? No, You saved his life, Miss Williamson. You saw his face. You know he survived." Carlo's voice remained calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You're not safe here anymore." I didn't ask for any of this. Neither did he. Carlo gestured toward the SUV where they were loading Diego. "But here we are." I stumbled after them onto the porch, panic rising in my throat. "You can't just—" The door to the middle SUV opened. Diego sat inside now, propped against the leather seat, his eyes half open. They found mine through the window, those sharp gray eyes, clearer now, lucid. "Come," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "Vieni. You're safer with me." "Safer?" I choked out. "You said if they found you, I'd be dead." "They have found me." His gaze held mine. And now they've found you. If you stay here, they'll come back. The ones who did this." He gestured weakly at himself. "Please." Every sane instinct I possessed screamed at me to refuse, to run inside, lock the door, call the police, and damn the consequences. But I looked at my little bungalow, my haven by the sea, and knew Carlo was right. That life was already gone. Against everything rational, I climbed into the SUV. The door closed with a heavy click. The convoy pulled away in perfect formation, and through the tinted window, I watched my home, my quiet, predictable, honest life, fade into the distance. Ahead lay only uncertainty, danger, and a man whose secrets might kill me. The drive took 40 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another world. We left the coast behind, winding through Miami's outskirts until the urban sprawl gave way to manicured estates hidden behind walls and trees. When our convoy finally slowed, I saw it. Iron gates 20 feet high, flanked by stone pillars and security cameras that tracked our approach. The gates swung open silently, my breath caught. The Ricci estate wasn't a house. It was an empire. A sprawling Mediterranean mansion rose before us, all white stone and terracotta tiles, surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges and fountains that belonged in European palaces. Armed guards in dark suits stood at intervals along the circular drive, speaking quietly into earpieces. We pulled up to the entrance, and Carlo opened my door. "This way, Ms. Williamson." I climbed out on unsteady legs, hyper-aware of the eyes tracking my every movement. Guards. Cameras. Even the landscape seemed to be watching. Inside was worse. Marble floors stretched in every direction, polished to a mirror shine. A chandelier dripped crystal overhead. Priceless art hung on the walls, pieces I'd only seen in museums. Everything whispered of wealth, power, and control. Diego was already being helped up the grand staircase by two men, his arms slung over one's shoulder. He looked back at me once, his expression unreadable, before disappearing down a hallway. Carlo gestured toward a different corridor. "You'll stay in the East Wing. Everything you need has been provided." "Stay?" I echoed. "For how long?" "Until it's safe." "Safe from what?" His pale eyes fixed on mine. "From the people who tried to kill him." He paused. "And from becoming collateral damage." Before I could respond, he was walking away, leaving me with a silent guard who led me down a maze of hallways to a bedroom that was easily twice the size of my entire bungalow. "Wait here," the guard said flatly, then closed the door. I heard the lock click. My chest tightened. I'm a prisoner. Night fell over the estate like a shroud. I'd spent hours pacing the room. Luxurious as it was still a cage. Silk sheets, an ensuite bathroom with marble counters, a balcony overlooking gardens I wasn't allowed to walk through. None of it mattered. I was trapped. A knock startled me from my thoughts. The door opened, and Diego stepped inside. He was shirtless, fresh bandages wrapped around his ribs, his movements careful but steady. In the low lamplight, I could see the full extent of the scars crossing his torso. Old bullet wounds, knife marks, stories written in violence. His dark hair was damp, pushed back from his face, and those gray eyes looked exhausted. "You shouldn't be walking around," I said reflexively. "I've had worse." He moved to the chair near the window, lowering himself with a grimace. "I came to thank you." "You already did." "Not properly." He met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something human beneath the command. "I owe you more than I can repay, Kimberly. You dove into that water when you didn't have to. You kept your word when most wouldn't have." "I'm a marine biologist," I said quietly. "I've taken an oath to preserve life." "Even lives like mine?" The question hung heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. What happened up there? The truth this time. Diego was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the dark gardens. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "The jet was sabotaged, mid-flight. Someone planted an explosive device in the hydraulics. made it look like mechanical failure. My stomach turned. Who? Luca Moretti, a rival. His jaw tightened. My father once controlled both our organizations. When he died, the alliance died with him. Moretti's been trying to wipe out my family ever since. And Carlo? Diego's eyes darkened. Carlo is my consigliere, my right hand. He paused. Or he's supposed to be. You don't trust him. In my world, trust is a liability. He looked at me. But someone fed Moretti my flight path. Someone knew I'd be on that jet alone at that exact time. The list of people with that information is very short. I wrapped my arms around myself. The ocean felt a world away now, replaced by marble and guns and secrets that could get me killed. Yet watching Diego in the lamplight, I saw something I hadn't expected. Beneath the scars and the command, beneath the danger he carried like a second skin, there was humanity, exhaustion, vulnerability. He was both predator and prey, danger and protection. You shouldn't have seen this world, he said quietly. I'm sorry you're here. I'm not sure I had a choice. You didn't. He stood carefully. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be complicated. He left, and I heard the lock click again behind him. I moved to the balcony, breathing in the humid night air, trying to feel grounded. That's when I heard voices drifting up from the garden below, 2 guards on patrol, speaking in low tones. Still don't understand how she found him that fast. Exactly. The crash. The rescue. Too convenient. You think she's a plant? Moretti's? The boss doesn't think so, but Carlo's watching her close. My blood turned to ice. I stepped back from the balcony, heart hammering. The people I'd saved, the people now holding me here, suspected I was a spy, and if they decided I was guilty, no amount of ocean between us would save me. The air in the Ricci estate had changed. What once felt like luxury now pulsed with quiet paranoia. Diego Ricci, alive, healing, and restless, paced the marble halls like a caged lion. The crash hadn't killed him, but betrayal had dug its claws deep. Kimberly could feel it. The guards no longer nodded when she passed. The kitchen whispers stopped when she entered. Diego was searching for a traitor, and the eyes that once admired her courage now watched her like she was holding a detonator. That evening, she carried a silver tray into his study. The firelight painted his face in orange and shadow. He looked stronger, sharper, the color returning to his cheeks, the weight of command back in his stare. Tea, she murmured, setting the cup beside a stack of reports. He didn't look up. His fingers tapped once, twice. Then his eyes lifted to hers, unreadable. If I find you lied to me, Kimberly, he said softly, not even the sea will hide you. Her breath caught. I didn't. Then you have nothing to fear. He turned away, voice calm again, almost too calm. Carlo says Moretti's men were tipped off before the crash. Someone close gave the coordinates. I don't believe in coincidences. Carlo, the loyal consigliere who had found her, who smiled like a shadow. Kimberly forced herself to nod, retreating before her trembling could show. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. The tension in the mansion was suffocating. So when she heard voices echoing faintly through the vent outside her room, she moved closer. Carlo's voice, sharp, low, and angry. She's the key. Moretti doesn't care how. He just wants her delivered. The jet failed. The girl didn't. Her pulse spiked. The girl. That was her. She crept into the hall, phone clutched tight, recording the muffled conversation as proof. Carlo's words slithered through the walls. Once I hand her over, I'm out. Ricci's empire will eat itself without his little savior. Kimberly's heart thundered. Carlo had been with Diego for years. He was family. How could he? A floorboard creaked behind her. Curiosity, a voice drawled. It's going to get you killed. She spun around. Carlo stood in the hallway, phone light glinting off his watch. His expression was almost amused. Mr. Ventresca, he raised a hand. Save it. I was hoping you'd be smarter. He stepped closer, voice dropping. You should have stayed in your pretty house, Miss Lifesaver." She bolted. Her bare feet slapped against marble as she raced down the corridor. He didn't shout. He didn't run. His footsteps were steady, measured, like a cat toying with its prey. Kimberly turned a corner toward the servants' exit, fumbling for the key code panel, a hand clamped over her mouth. The world spun. A sharp pain bloomed at the back of her head. Everything went black. She woke to darkness and the smell of diesel and salt. Her wrists were bound behind her, rope cutting into her skin. The air was damp, the ground metal beneath her. A soft hum of engines, a distant seagull, a dock. Blinking through the haze, she saw crates stacked high, marked with a red serpent logo. Moretti's emblem. Carlo's voice drifted from somewhere nearby, calm and businesslike. "She's the proof of my loyalty. The boss gets the girl. I get safe passage." Another man answered, his accent rougher. "Ricci will come for her." Carlo chuckled. "I'm counting on it." Kimberly's stomach twisted. The ropes dug deeper as she struggled, wrists slick with sweat. A single bulb flickered above her, swaying gently in the sea breeze leaking through broken windows. She swallowed hard. Think. Stay calm. Her phone was gone. Her throat was dry. Her only weapon was her mind. In the distance, water lapped softly against the dock posts. She could almost see the scene playing out. Diego's fury when he discovered her missing. His suspicion at first, then realization. He'd come. She knew he would. But would it be too late? Carlo crouched beside her. His cologne stung her nose. Sandalwood and smoke. "You know, I admired you," he said conversationally. "Most people would have let him drown, but not you. You jumped into hell for him, and look where it got you." "Why?" she rasped. He smiled faintly. "Because men like Ricci forget where power comes from. He thinks loyalty's a leash. I'm cutting mine." He stood, brushing dust from his suit. "You'll fetch me freedom. That's worth more than gold." Kimberly stared up at him. "You're trading me for your life. What do you think he'll do when he finds out?" He leaned closer, whispering, "He won't find out until it's too late." A distant sound interrupted him, the faint, rhythmic chop of engines over water. Carlo frowned, glancing toward the open bay door. The night was heavy with fog. "Already?" the other man muttered, peering into the dark. Kimberly's pulse leapt. The noise grew louder. Not engines from a single boat, a fleet. Carlo's radio crackled. Multiple signals approaching the east dock, unidentified vehicles armed. He swore under his breath. He found us. Kimberly's heart surged with wild relief and terror. Diego was coming. Carlo spun toward her, rage replacing his smooth calm. "You led them here." He raised his gun, finger tightening on the trigger. Before he could fire, a sharp crack split the air, a sniper shot. The bulb above her shattered, plunging the room into darkness. Shouts erupted outside. Gunfire echoed across the water, flashes of orange cutting through the fog. Kimberly ducked, dragging her bound wrists against a jagged crate corner until the rope frayed, pain slicing through her skin. Outside, men screamed and engines roared. The night had caught fire again. Not in the sky this time, but across the waves. Through the chaos, she could hear Diego's voice, rough and commanding, barking orders in Italian. Every sound was chaos and salvation combined. She yanked her hands free, crawling toward the door as Carlo cursed somewhere in the dark. The scent of gunpowder mixed with salt filled the air. The last thing she heard before the warehouse door blew open was Diego shouting her name, raw, desperate, alive. And then, amid the storm of bullets and betrayal, she realized the truth. The night she pulled him from the ocean wasn't the end of her rescue. It was only the beginning. Gunfire cracked through the night like lightning over black water. The docks burned with muzzle flashes, their echoes ricocheting across metal containers and crashing waves. Kimberly flinched as splinters burst from the wooden pillar behind her. Her wrists were still raw from the ropes, blood slicking her palms. Smoke clawed at her lungs. Every second felt stolen. Then, through the chaos, headlights tore through the fog. Diego's convoy. Black SUVs fanned out, engines roaring, cutting through smoke like predators. The metallic thud of doors opening followed, men shouting commands in Italian. "Diego," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief and fear. Carlo snarled from behind her, pressing the barrel of his gun to her temple. "Don't move, sweetheart. The show's about to start." The gunfire slowed. Shadows emerged through the smoke. Diego Ricci himself, coat half open, white shirt smeared with old blood and ocean salt. He looked every bit the man she'd dragged from the abyss, except now the abyss looked back through him. "Let her go," Diego called, stepping forward slowly, his hands raised. "You want me. Take me." Carlo laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the gunfire. "I already did, boss, the moment I shot your plane out of the sky." A chill rolled through the dockyard. Kimberly froze. "Carlo, he shot the jet down?" Diego's jaw clenched. "You were like a brother." Carlo pressed the gun harder against Kimberly's head. "That's why it had to be me. You don't kill family, Diego. You free yourself from it." The air was thick with smoke, betrayal, and gasoline. A crate nearby caught fire, orange flames licking upward, illuminating Carlo's sneer. Kimberly's eyes darted to the side. A fallen guard's pistol lay just out of reach, half hidden behind a coil of rope. Diego took another step closer, his voice lowering. "She has nothing to do with this." Carlo's laugh came ragged. "She has everything to do with this. That stupid girl ruined everything. You were supposed to die in that crash, Ricci, but she dragged you out, and now she gets to finish what she started." He cocked the gun. The metallic click echoed like a countdown. Kimberly's heart pounded. She remembered the night she dove into the freezing sea, the weight of Diego's body pulling her down, the taste of salt and fear. Now the water was gone, but she was drowning all over again. Diego stepped forward another pace. "Carlo, look at me. You're scared. Moretti won't protect you. He never protects rats." Carlo's jaw twitched. At least he doesn't pretend to be a god. Kimberly's pulse surged. The flame's glow revealed a shard of glass at her feet. Slowly she shifted, using it to saw at the rope. Every second was agony. Diego dropped his hands. "You want my blood? Then let her go and take it, just you and me." Carlo's finger tightened on the trigger. "You think I'm that stupid?" "Maybe not stupid," Diego said softly, stepping closer still. "Just tired." Carlo's eyes flicked toward him, and that single glance was enough. Kimberly twisted, kicking the barrel aside. The gun discharged. The explosion deafened her. Fire flashed across her vision as pain seared her upper arm. She fell sideways, the rope snapping free as the bullet grazed her skin. Carlo turned, furious, but she was already reaching for the fallen pistol. "Kimberly, no!" Diego shouted, but it was too late. Her trembling hand steadied, the world narrowing to a tunnel. Carlo's face, the smoke, the roaring fire behind him. She pulled the trigger. The bullet struck him square in the chest. His eyes widened, disbelief, not pain. He stumbled backward, knocking over a drum of fuel. Flames licked his sleeve. Within seconds, the fire caught, racing up his body. He collapsed near the water's edge, the reflection of fire dancing across his lifeless eyes. The docks erupted around them. Gunfire, shouts, metal groaning as explosions rippled through the stacked crates. Diego ran to her, crouching as embers fell like burning snow. "Kimberly, look at me!" She was shaking, the gun falling from her grip. "He was going to kill you." "You saved me," he whispered, voice breaking. "You saved me. Again." He pressed his forehead to hers, their faces lit by fire. Around them, his men shouted, dragging wounded away, but in that moment, they were alone, two souls bound by survival and sin. Sirens wailed in the distance, the Coast Guard, the fire department, the law closing in. The dockyard was a war zone now, orange and black, smoke spilling toward the sky like ghosts of the dead. Diego lifted her in his arms, despite his own wounds. "We have to move." "I can walk," she whispered, dazed. "You already swam through hell for me. Let me carry you out of it." He carried her toward the SUVs, boots splashing through puddles reflecting the fire. Behind them, Carlo's body burned beside the water, a grim mirror of the jet that once sank beneath it. As they reached the gate, a massive explosion split the air. The dockyard ignited fully, flames swallowing everything that had once bound them in fear. Kimberly turned her head, watching as fire consumed the traitor's empire. And with it, the last of Diego's illusions of control. The man she had pulled from a sinking jet was now pulling her from a burning world. Inside the SUV, as they sped away, Diego's bloodied hand brushed hers. "It's over." Kimberly stared out the window, the sea reflecting the inferno behind them. "No," she murmured. "It's just changed shape." He looked at her then, the woman who'd dragged him from death twice, her face streaked with soot and seawater. And for the first time since that crash, Diego Ricci let his walls fall completely. "Then whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we face it together." Outside, the dockyard burned until the horizon itself glowed. Two survivors, one forged by water, the other by fire, drove into the unknown, bound by the same truth that had saved them both. Neither could drown anymore. They had already learned to breathe in chaos. We drove north along the coast in silence, leaving the burning dockyard and Carlo's body behind us. Diego sat beside me in the back of the SUV, his hand pressed against his side where his wounds had reopened during the fight. Blood seeped through his shirt, dark and spreading. My own arm throbbed where Carlo's bullet had grazed me, hastily bandaged with torn fabric. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us looked back. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only exhaustion and the weight of what I'd done. I killed a man. The echo of the gunshot still rang in my ears, the look on Carlo's face as he fell. "Here," Diego said quietly. The SUV turned down a narrow road hidden by sea grape and palm trees. At the end sat a small villa, white stucco and blue shutters, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Simple. Isolated. Nothing like the Ricci compound. A safe house. The driver opened our door and handed Diego a set of keys without a word, then drove away, leaving us alone. For the first time in days, the world went quiet. Inside, the villa was sparse but beautiful. Whitewashed walls, terracotta tiles, windows open to the ocean breeze. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below filled the silence. It reminded me of home, of the life I'd had before everything changed. Diego moved to the couch and sank down with a grimace, his hand still pressed to his bleeding side. I found a first aid kit in the bathroom and returned to him, my own arm screaming in protest. "Let me see," I said. He lifted his shirt. The bandages I'd applied days ago were soaked through, the stitches torn. I worked in silence, cleaning and restitching with hands that trembled less than they should have. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. When I finished, he caught my wrist gently. "Your turn." I let him peel away the makeshift bandage on my arm. The bullet had only grazed me, but the wound was angry and raw. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned and wrapped it properly, his movements careful, almost reverent. "You saved my life," he said quietly, not looking up. "Again. You came for me first." I had to. He finally met my eyes. "You're the only person in my world who had nothing to gain from keeping me alive." The words settled between us like stones. Diego leaned back, exhaustion etched deep into his face. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. He stared at the ocean for a long moment before speaking again. "My father was murdered when I was 23, he said, voice low. Shot in his own office by men he'd trusted for decades. His consigliere, his oldest friend. Men who'd eaten at our table, who'd sworn loyalty." He paused. "I learned that night that trust is the most dangerous thing you can give." I sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. I spent years building walls, he continued, making sure no one could get close enough to hurt me again. And then he turned to look at me. You dove into the dark for me, a stranger. You had nothing to gain, everything to lose, and you did it anyway. My throat tightened. I almost didn't. He raised an eyebrow. That night on the beach, I confessed softly. When you grabbed my wrist and begged me not to call the police when I saw the gun, I almost left you there. Shame heated my cheeks. I was terrified. I thought about getting in my truck and driving away. But you didn't. No? I looked down at my bandaged arm. I don't know why. Maybe I was saving myself too. Maybe I needed to believe there was still something good I could do in a world that felt like it was drowning. Diego was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached for my hand. He lifted it gently and pressed his lips to my knuckles, a gesture of old-world reverence, formal and tender all at once. It was the kind of gesture that belonged to a different era, a different man. Not a mafia lord, not a killer, just a man. Grazie, he whispered against my skin, for pulling me out of the dark. For the first time since the night of the crash, I saw him not as Diego Ricci, the dangerous, powerful, untouchable boss, but as someone human, someone who'd been drowning long before his jet hit the water, someone who'd needed saving just as much as I had. The sun dipped below the horizon and the villa filled with golden light. Outside, waves crashed against the rocks in an endless rhythm. Inside, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I woke to the sound of waves and the warmth of sunlight streaming through white curtains. For a moment, one perfect, disoriented moment, I forgot where I was. Forgot the gunfire and the blood. Forgot Carlo's body falling beside the water. Forgot everything except the rhythm of the ocean and the unfamiliar softness of the bed beneath me. Then reality settled back in, gentle this time. The villa, the safe house, Diego. I sat up slowly, wincing as my bandaged arm protested. Through the open bedroom door, I could see into the main living area. Diego stood on the balcony, shirtless, his bandages bright white against his tanned skin. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, his voice low and commanding even from a distance. I watched him for a moment. This man I'd pulled from death. This dangerous, complicated man who'd somehow become my anchor in a world that had capsized. He ended the call and turned, sensing my gaze. Something softened in his expression. You should be resting, he said. So should you. A ghost of a smile. I've had worse. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. He moved inside, careful with his movements. Come, I made coffee. It's terrible, but it's hot. The days that followed blurred together in a strange, suspended reality. We existed in a bubble at the villa, cut off from the violence and chaos of Miami, from the world of syndicates and blood feuds. Diego's men came and went, bringing supplies, delivering reports, their faces carefully blank when they saw us together. I learned to read the tension in Diego's shoulders when the news was bad, the subtle relaxation when things shifted in his favor. Moretti's fractured, he told me on the third day, standing at the kitchen counter while I changed his bandages. His captains are turning on each other. Some are trying to negotiate, others are running. And you? My men are reclaiming what's ours. His jaw tightened. Ending this. I smoothed the fresh bandage over his ribs, my fingers lingering on his skin. How does it end? With Moretti dead or exiled, with his organization scattered. He caught my hand, stilling it. With no one left who wants me dead. Is that possible in your world? He was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but I'm trying to believe it is. On the fifth day, I found myself on the beach below the villa, barefoot in the sand, letting the waves wash over my feet. The ocean stretched endless before me, the same ocean I dove into that night, the same water that had nearly claimed both our lives. It felt like a lifetime ago. Diego appeared beside me, moving quieter than a man his size should. "You miss it," he said. Not a question. "The ocean?" "Your life. Before." I considered lying, but what was the point? Sometimes. It was simpler. Safer. "You could go back." I turned to look at him. Could I? His expression darkened. "Once Moretti's gone, once the dust settles, I'd make sure you were protected. Give you your life back." "Is that what you want?" The question hung between us, carried on the salt wind. Diego stared out at the horizon, the morning sun turning his gray eyes the almost silver. "What I want," he said slowly, "and what's right for you are two different things." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him. "What do you want, Diego?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something raw and unguarded in his face. "I want to be the kind of man who deserves to be saved." My throat tightened. "You already are." "I'm a killer, Kimberly. I've done things that would horrify you." "You're also the man who stepped into gunfire to save me, who thanked me with a kiss to my hand like I was something precious." I reached up, touching his jaw. "You're both men, Diego. The question is which one you choose to be." He caught my hand, pressing it against his cheek, his eyes closing. "I don't know if I can be anything other than what I am." "Then be what you are," I whispered, "but be it with me." When he kissed me, it was soft and desperate all at once, like a man surfacing from deep water, gasping for air. His hands cradled my face with a gentleness that contradicted every scar on his body. And for that moment, on that beach, we weren't a mafia boss and the woman who saved him. We were just two people who'd survived the drowning. A week after the dockyard, Diego received the call that changed everything. I was reading on the balcony when he stepped outside, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. The Miami sun burned bright overhead, cutting through the storm clouds that had threatened rain all morning. "It's done," he said quietly. I set the book down. "Moretti? Dead." His own lieutenant put a bullet in him this morning. Diego leaned against the railing, staring out at the endless blue. "The territories are ours again. The families have agreed to a truce. So it's over." It's over. I should have felt relieved. Victory. Something. Instead, I felt only the strange weight of uncertainty. What happened now? What happened to us? Diego seemed to sense my thoughts. He moved to stand beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Below us, the waves crashed against the rocks in their eternal rhythm, the same sound that had filled my bungalow, my old life. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked softly. "The crash?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, every time I breathe, I turned to look at him. The bandages were gone now, replaced by new scars that would join the constellation already marking his skin. His face was still sharp, still dangerous, but there was something different in his eyes, something lighter. "I was drowning long before that jet hit the water," he continued, "drowning in my father's legacy, in blood and violence and betrayal. I thought that was all there was, all I deserved." He met my gaze. "And then you pulled me out." "I just did what anyone would." "No." His voice was firm. "You did what no one in my world would ever do. You risked everything for a stranger. You showed me that mercy still exists. Maybe I deserve it." My eyes burned. "Diego, I'm not a good man, Kimberly. I never will be. My hands are stained with things I can't wash away." He turned to face me fully, taking my hands in his. "But with you, I want to try. I want to be better than what I was, better than what my world demands." "You drowned once, Diego," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't do it again." Something fierce and tender flashed in his eyes. He stepped closer, resting his hand over mine on the railing. Only if you promise to keep pulling me out. The words settled between us like a vow. Below, the waves crashed like thunder, the same thunder that had split the night sky when his jet went down. The same water that had nearly claimed us both. But we'd survived. We'd saved each other. And maybe that was enough. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I leaned into Diego's side. His arm came around me, careful of my healing wound, holding me with a reverence that still surprised me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" He considered. "Now I have to rebuild, make amends where I can, try to be a leader my father would have been proud of." He paused. "And I'd like you beside me, if you'll stay." "In your world?" "In whatever world we build together." He tilted my chin up to meet his gaze. "I know it's dangerous. I know it's not the quiet life you had. But I can give you a purpose, a place, and I swear on everything I am, I will keep you safe." I thought about my little bungalow by the sea, my research, my predictable, honest, solitary life. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone who existed in a dream I'd woken from. This was real. The man beside me, scarred and complicated and dangerous and trying. This was real. "I'm a marine biologist," I said slowly. "I study life in the ocean, how things adapt to survive in hostile environments, how they evolve. And maybe I've been studying the wrong ocean." I looked up at him. "Maybe I need to learn how life survives in your world, how to adapt, how to evolve." His grip tightened on my hand. "You'd do that? Give up everything you were?" "I'm not giving it up. I'm adding to it." I smiled. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you keep breathing." He laughed, a real laugh, rare and beautiful. Then he pulled me closer and kissed my forehead, my temple, finally my lips. It was a kiss that tasted of salt and second chances, of redemption earned in fire and sealed by faith. When we broke apart, the sun had touched the horizon, setting the ocean ablaze with color. "I never thanked you properly," Diego said quietly, "for that night, for diving into the dark when you had every reason to stay safe on shore." "You thanked me plenty." "No." He shook his head. "I told you I owed you. That's different from gratitude." He took both my hands in his gray eyes intense. "Grazie, Kimberly, per tutto, per avermi salvato, per avermi dato una ragione per respirare di nuovo." I didn't speak Italian, but I understood the weight of the words, the emotion behind them. "What did you say?" I whispered. "Thank you. For everything. For saving me. For giving me a reason to breathe again." Tears blurred my vision. "You gave me the same thing." And it was true. Before that night, I'd been treading water in my own life, safe, comfortable, but not really living, not really feeling. Diego had pulled me into the depths, into danger and chaos and violence. But he'd also shown me I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, braver, more alive. We'd rescued each other. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge, pinpricks of light against the deepening blue. The villa behind us glowed warm and golden. The ocean before us whispered its eternal song. Diego's hand found mine, fingers intertwining. "The first night I woke up in your house," he said, "I thought I was in hell, punishment for everything I'd done. And now?" He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he smiled, really smiled. "Now I think maybe I'm being given a chance at something else." "What's that?" "Redemption." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Below us, a wave crashed against the rocks, sending spray high into the air. The water caught the last of the sunlight, turning to liquid gold for just a moment before falling back into darkness. Another wave followed, and another. The ocean never stopped moving, never stopped trying, never stopped returning to shore. I understood that now. Some rescues don't end, they just change form. They become the reason you keep breathing, keep fighting, keep choosing to surface even when the depths call you down. Diego had drowned in violence and betrayal and the weight of a legacy he never asked for. I had drowned in safety and solitude and a life half-lived. And on a night when fire fell from the sky and metal screamed and the ocean opened its jaws, we'd found each other in the dark. 2 people drowning. 2 people learning to breathe. "Come on," Diego said softly, tugging my hand. "It's getting cold." I let him lead me inside, but I paused at the threshold, looking back one more time at the ocean, at the waves that had tried to kill us and the water that had brought us together. A promise formed in my heart, wordless but absolute. "I'll keep pulling you out, Diego Ricci. Every time you sink, every time the darkness calls, I'll dive in and drag you back to the light. And maybe you'll do the same for me." Inside, Diego was building a fire in the stone fireplace, his movements careful but sure. I watched him work, this dangerous man trying to create warmth, and felt something settle deep in my chest. Hope. "Kimberly," he said without turning around, "when this is truly over, when the last of Moretti's people are gone, I want to do something." "What?" He turned to face me, firelight dancing across his features. "I want to fund a marine research center, in your name. Let you continue your work, but with resources you've never had. Make something good come from all this." I stared at him, speechless. "You saved my life," he continued. "Let me help you save others. The ocean. The creatures you care about. Let me be part of something that builds instead of destroys." "Diego, that's..." My voice broke. "That's everything." He crossed to me, cupping my face in his scarred hands. "You're everything. You showed a monster he could be a man again. The least I can do is help you be the woman you've always been." I kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't say into it, all the fear and relief and hope and desperate, impossible love that had grown in the spaces between survival and surrender. When we finally broke apart, the fire was crackling. The villa was warm, and outside, the ocean kept its vigil. Some rescues never end, they just change who's drowning. And tonight, for the first time since that crash, neither of us was sinking. We were finally learning to float. Later that night, I stood on the balcony one last time, wrapped in one of Diego's shirts, watching the moon paint a silver path across the dark water. Behind me, I heard him approach, felt his arms circle my waist, his chin rest on my shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "That I used to study how things survive in the ocean," I said softly. "How they adapt to pressure and darkness and predators. How they evolve or die. And I understand now that we're all just trying to survive. You in your world, me in mine. We're all just swimming through dark water, hoping we surface before our lungs give out." His arms tightened. "You surfaced for me. We surfaced for each other." The truth of it resonated between us, deeper than words. Below, the waves crashed against the rocks, eternal, relentless, beautiful. The same waves that had swallowed a burning jet, the same water that had tried to claim us both, but we'd refused to drown. And standing there, wrapped in each other, the ocean stretching vast and endless before us, I finally understood what redemption meant. It wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about choosing, every single day, to surface, to breathe, to reach for the light even when the darkness called. It was about finding someone who'd dive into hell to pull you out, and diving in to save them right back. "Ti amo," Diego whispered against my hair. I never thought I'd say those words to anyone. What does it mean? It means you taught a drowning man to breathe. I turned in his arms, meeting those gray eyes that had first opened on a dark beach, desperate and afraid. They were different now, Still dangerous, still intense, but alive with something I'd helped kindle. "Then breathe, Diego," I whispered, "and don't stop." He smiled, that rare, beautiful smile, and kissed me as the ocean sang below us. Two rescues that became one redemption. Fire and water, violence and mercy, darkness and light. The Mafia Boss and the woman who saved him, bound not by fear or power, but by something stronger than both. The choice to keep swimming, the choice to keep breathing, the choice to keep pulling each other from the depths, over and over, for as long as the tides would let them. And below, eternal and patient, the ocean kept its secrets and waited, because the sea always waits, and love, like water, always finds a way.